working to create a continuum of care for seniors. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Ross. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me back.
You're here to give us an update on an issue that we talked about many months ago, and it's related to adult day centers or drop-in centers. Talk to us a little bit about where this issue stands today related to licensing of these centers.
Right. A number of years back, we determined that we needed to have licensure for the adult day centers that were handling some of our more severely impaired seniors, folks who had fairly advanced Alzheimer's or dementia or some other impairments, and that were really a lot for people to take care of 24/7 at home, but also that didn't want to be put into a full-service nursing home, a residential nursing home. And so it was considered a good idea to provide some licensing standards for these kinds of centers. But it got a little bit complicated because a number of our senior centers were looking at the opportunity to have a drop-in center with some supervisory capacity for the much less acute situation. Someone who was beginning to get a little fuzzy but wasn't really far down the spectrum of Alzheimer's or dementia. And so we had an unlicensed and then a licensed set of facilities, and there was some confusion between the two as to where the line should be drawn between them.
At this point, you're working to create a regulatory framework for these two different types of facilities. Why is that important, and where does it stand now?
Well, it's very important for people to know which facility they ought to be considering for themselves or for their family. If you really have a more severe impairment, if you are not able to toilet yourself, if you're having trouble with a family member who wanders off fairly rapidly and does not know where they are, they need extra supervision. They need the kind of facility that is going to be able to handle that. And of course, there's a fair amount of liability associated with it. So the licensed full-service adult day centers are really much more appropriate for them. For someone who is a little forgetful, might leave the stove off, but otherwise is toileting themselves, is generally a cooperative response to commands and suggestions, is really not to the point of one of the more severe cases, and can be handled in a less restrictive and much more of a less expensive and more friendly environment, similar to the senior centers that they may have been visiting previously before anyway. So the question is making sure that we have a good assessment tool to check and see which of the appropriate settings these folks ought to be in. In my own experience with the Kennett Senior Center, there were some folks who were in the drop-in center, and that was temporarily shut down by the Department of Aging when they looked at the fact that they weren't licensed. And those people did not want to go to the adult day center. They just went back home and became more of an anxiety for their families. So if it's appropriate, they should definitely be moved into the more full licensed setting. But for those that are beginning to get a little bit troubled, we want to have a full spectrum for people at all stages so that all of them are taken care of in the most appropriate setting possible.
And we just have a short time left, but where does this framework or creating this framework stand right now?
Well, right now we have some good negotiations between the various different parties involved, and I'm hoping that we'll have a settlement quite soon, and then we might be able to lock it in by legislation to make sure that people have it to be confident of in the future.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Representative Chris Ross. I'm Jill Horner.